Let's look at how to use the import function here to bring in our own AIF or wave samples to create our own custom Sample Tank 3 instruments. Now again, in the Play tab, in the Instrument sub-tab, with this menu we can use the Import Samples function to bring in our own samples. Now the first thing we need to set is the pathway to the samples that we want to convert and import. Now when you hit the Browse button, you'll probably be brought to your default Instruments folder, so you need to know where the samples are. In this case, I have some here. Miscellaneous drum samples. I'm going to go to these samples here, and I'm going to bring in, let's say, these snare samples. So I'm going to click Open for that parent folder for these half a dozen samples or so, and that's set there. So let me call these Slum Drum Snares, and of course you can name it whatever you want. And here we have the pathway for where we want the converted samples stored at. And again, we can hit the Browse button and use the navigation to put them where we want. Now here's the Imported Instruments subfolder in my Sample Tank 3 folder, and I have those Novatron patches that I imported last video. So I could bring them in here if I want, or I can create a new category, but I'm going to bring them into Imported Instruments. And let's hit Open, and I've got that set now. So we've determined what we want to import and where we want it to be imported to. Now we need to determine where we want it to appear in our browser. So if I click hold here, I have all my familiar categories, and I'm going to choose Imported Instruments so that they appear there. So let's go Imported Instruments, and I'm good. The tempo indicator here is useful or necessary only for loops that you're importing. Right now it's not that relevant. So here's a couple of options. We can import chromatically, and that's what I'm going to do for these non-pitch snare samples, and we can set where we want it to start. I'm going to have it start, let's say, at C2. So that it's low on my keyboard. Of course, you can have it start wherever you want. And that'll import like that. Now, if you're importing samples that use pitched samples, like let's say a bass or guitar, what you need to do is start the name of the samples off with the note name and then follow it by a space. So for example, I'll give you an example here in the description. You go C1 space electric bass .aiff, and the next one will be C#1 space electric bass. Now the important thing is to remember the space, because this import function algorithm will read everything before the first space. So make sure that the first thing is the actual note name and then the space, and you'll be okay. And you just use this name mode and hit import and you're good. But for now, let's go to chromatic, and I'll hit the import button. And sometimes this import routine is a little bit finicky with the naming. It may or may not work the first time. It says enter a valid name. I'm just going to enter the same name again. Slum Drums Snares. And let's try that again. And now it's working. So now when I scroll down under Imported Instruments, we'll see Slum Drum Snares, and I can load that in. And there it is, and they should be mapped out starting at C2. As expected. And if we look in the Finder, you can see that in my Sample Tank 3 folder, I have imported samples, and there's the Slum Drum Snares.pak, that's the format for the samples, and these are the Novatron patches from the last videos, and they're all in .pak formats. And in the Instruments, Imported Instruments folder, I have the Slum Drum Snares.st3i, the instrument format, and again, these Novatron patches are all the individual st3i versions. So they're appearing there like that, and of course I could have created a subfolder if I want to import other, for example, Slum Drum instruments. I could create a subfolder. This was created automatically when I imported in the last video, but in this case I designated just the Imported Instruments as the location, so it's created raw and loose in this folder. And so within Sample Tank, it appears loose within the Imported Instruments folder rather than in a user-created subfolder. So just to reiterate, we go to Import Samples, we choose what we want to import, we choose what we want to name the imported file, and then we designate where we want it imported to, and this is where I would create the subfolder if I wanted to. Within the Imported Instruments folder, I can use the new folder to create a subfolder. And then we choose what category we want it to appear in the browser. And for the importation of samples that are pitched, choose the name mode here and make sure to name your samples with the note name first, followed by a space. And when we're mapping chromatically, as we did in this case, choose this option and then set the note that you want it to start mapping at. So that's it. See you for more in the next video.